Every time Shaw fixes this world, everything works, and then everybody else is fine. I show up and we have technology problems. So we'll see. All right. For the record, for this freshman orientation, I'm going to be simcomming, so I will be talking and signing at the same time. I will say, don't make a habit of trying to do it yourself. I will talk about it later about why it is not accommodating for anyone, but because we have a mixture of both hearing and deaf in the room today, and I don't have an interpreter, I'm going to simcomm. I will be prioritizing the English because this is for hearing people. This is for new people in the community who are generally hearing. So I will be prioritizing the English instead of prioritizing the signs. Just forewarning before we start. Anyway, welcome on into freshman orientation for Helping Hands, a sign language VR community. A little bit about myself. So I am actually a real life certified interpreter. I've been signing about 10 years now. 6 of those have been actual professional interpreting. I actually have 2 degrees. I have one that is an associate's in modern languages, where I studied Spanish, French, and German. And then I have a second degree where I just focus on ASL and interpreting. I have my certification now. I have experienced both interpreting real life in like a variety of settings, mostly education, but I've also experienced medical interpreting, job and interview interpreting, stage interpreting, festival interpreting, music interpreting. I've done quite a lot. And my pronouns are he, him. There's a quick list of the things we're going to be talking about today for freshman orientation. So the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a definition of terms that's going to help us throughout the rest of the presentation. We're going to talk about sign language itself, talk about ASL, PSE, and SEE. We're going to talk about mutism. That's a big one for our community. Where and how to learn sign in VR, and then the Discord itself, because that's where most of us interact on a daily basis. So here are terms that we're going to talk about right at the beginning. So the absolute first one, and very, very important one, is spectrum. A lot of the things we're talking about today is not binary. It is not one or the other. It is a spectrum. There's a spectrum of sign skills. There's a spectrum of deafness. There's a spectrum of everything. We live in a real world where everything is shades of gray. You cannot definitively say a lot of things are one or the other. Such as the word deaf has 2 distinct meanings, whether you have a capital D or a lowercase d. So if you see the word deaf with a lowercase d, that is talking about the medical condition, talking about the inability to hear. And it can be anywhere between you have a very low hearing loss to profoundly deaf, where you can't hear anything. I've interpreted for students who, honestly, most of their teachers thought they were hearing because of how well they could hear, how well they could speak. I've interpreted for students who you could start a chainsaw behind them and they'd have no idea. It's all a spectrum about the level of deafness whenever you're talking about lowercase d. When you're talking about uppercase d, that is deaf as the cultural identity. So that means a person who identifies themselves as part of the deaf community. Now, the deaf community has different levels in it as well. This part over here, we're going to talk about deaf versus hard of hearing. So most people who label themselves as deaf are very dependent on sign language. They cannot really hear very well. They are typically faced with a lot of similar challenges, and that's kind of what unites them. Some have gone to deaf residential schools. Some have been in mainstream schools their whole life and been very isolated experience that disconnect from their hearing peers and then have found community with other people who've experienced the same thing in the deaf community. Those are the ones who typically are big D deaf. There's also hard of hearing. Those are the ones who typically have a medical diagnosis of hearing loss, but tend to be able to hear well, speak well, and can get along better with the hearing people, and don't typically have that same disconnect from the hearing world. Again, it's a spectrum. There is not one or the other. This is something that each deaf person themselves is allowed to determine for themselves. If they want to identify as deaf, identify as hard of hearing. And then, of course, you have hearing people who aren't involved. Real quick, talk about culture. So, culture, as our wonderful definition is, a shared characteristics and knowledge of a particular group of people encompassing language, religion, cuisine, social habits, music, and arts. Very long thing to say that culture is the people, what they believe in, what their shared interests are, shared beliefs, shared experiences are. That is their culture, and we are not allowed to really define that. That's their thing. The deaf community, they say what is deaf culture, what is not deaf culture. It's their thing. But one major facet of deaf culture is the use of sign language, because most, even some of the students that I've interpreted for who can hear very well, can talk very well, they've all said the same thing. Sign language helps. Even if they can talk fine, having somebody give that little extra support of a visual language helps. So the deaf community they cherish sign language. So our definition of sign language is a system of communication using hand movements, gestures, facial expressions to convey a meaning. Kind of obvious. Sign language. You guys have probably all heard about Helping Hands. You've been to a class, maybe. I'm sure you guys know what sign language is. Now, there are two special exceptions kind of to the rule of hearing people not being involved in deaf community and not being parts of the deaf community. I didn't say that very well. How do I explain this better? You got the deaf community. You have the hearing community. There are some hearing people who learn sign, become well enough skilled that they can fully interact with the deaf community. But the deaf community still sees them as hearing. They are still hearing. They don't have that shared experience, that shared cultural values. They don't have that. And most of the time, honestly, no matter what you can do as a hearing person, it's almost impossible to be fully accepted into the deaf community as part of the deaf community unless you're one of these. So either an interpreter like me, who's a hearing person who has gone, studied, got my certification, put in the work, shown that I have learned and understand deaf culture, deaf values, and can provide effective communication to help the deaf community interact with the hearing community and the hearing community interact with the deaf community. The other option is CODA, which our other resident ASL interpreter in Helping Hands is a CODA. You may have met him, CODA Pop. So CODA means child of deaf adult. So that is a hearing person who was born with deaf parents, who grew up with that cultural identity, who grew up signing probably, who grew up in a fully deaf cultural household. They're kind of automatically accepted. It's the opposite of most hearing parents who they get a new child and the doctor tells them, oh, your baby's deaf. And they're all kind of like, oh, disappointed, baby can't hear. It's the same thing with deaf people. They get a newborn baby and the doctor comes in and says, oh, your baby's hearing, he can hear. And the parents go, oh, dang. It's kind of the same thing. You're automatically accepted. You are part of the community. You are culturally deaf. You just can hear as a CODA. So, one question that pops up all the time, and that's really kind of what this freshman orientation is about, is trying to address these questions that pop up before everybody starts asking the same thing. One question that pops up quite often is, oh, sign language. So it means like you can learn sign and then you go to anywhere in the world and sign with the people there, because sign language is universal, right? No. And hopefully if you've already joined Helping Hands, you've already gone to a class, you've probably already seen we offer different kinds of sign languages. So sign language is not universal. Sign language, let me see. What did I put here? Because I thought it was really, really nice. Sign language evolved much like spoken languages. Difference of culture, geographic regions, generational mutations of meanings, all that exists within sign language. It's the same thing with you guys hearing people coming up with words like yeet, which is one of my favorite words now. I love the word yeet. If you go back 10 years, nobody knows what that means. Nobody's ever used that word before. It's a mutation. It is a new word that has popped up and been accepted. It has a definition. ASL has the same thing. We, as ASL users, have a language, have a way to come up with new ideas and new words that have gone out. It's just a natural language. Now, it's the same thing with here in America, where I'm from, and people who live in Britain. We both speak English, but their English and my English are different. We have completely different words for the same thing. Like, for example, what I call French fries, they call chips. Almost said crisps, but no. My British friends would yell at me if I said that. Chips. It's the same thing conceptually, but we have different words for it because we have different culture, we have different locations, we developed that language separately. It's the same thing with sign language. We in America doing ASL developed our signs here differently than people in Mexico who developed their sign language differently. People in England who developed their sign language differently, in France and Germany and all over. Now, there are some sign languages who are very, very similar. Like, honestly, I have seen Singapore, their sign language, and my ASL, I've watched, I can't find any difference yet. I'm sure there's got to be some, but I can understand them fully. Completely different geographic regions, but I understand their signs. And it's not, they said it's not ASL, it's Singapore sign language. I don't know. And it's the same with British Sign Language and Auslan, which is Australian Sign Language. What I've seen, they look very, very similar. I can't really tell a difference, but they developed independently of each other. So here in Helping Hands, we offer some of these international sign languages. We do not have all the sign languages because it's impossible. And we will talk about later how we pick our teachers and what requirements we have for our teachers. And that's kind of why we're limited on what languages we teach. But we currently have... I have a pointer, don't I?
Backwards.
Ha I can do this. I can do this. All right, here's our list. We have ASL, BSL, LSF, KSL, DGS, and JSL. JSL is our most recent one. We just added it a few months ago, so we finally have a Japanese sign language. I will suggest that here in VR, most people learn ASL. That is our biggest community. Most of our people are American, and then the ones who aren't typically learn ASL first because that's what most of the community learns, and they want to communicate that way. I will highly suggest, if you are not from America, if you are from another country that has their own sign language, prioritize learning that one, because that's the one that you will actually be able to use in real life. You can go out and meet people who use that. If you are a British person and you're learning ASL, you go out and meet like real life British deaf people, they're not gonna have an idea what you're talking about. Try and learn your country's sign language first, and by all means learn ASL at the same time, because we in VR, typically most of us use ASL, but your country, your native land, that place, that's where you will find real life deaf people to interact with. Prioritize their language, prioritize your country's sign language. It's just going to make it better in the long run for everybody. Oh, and the little blurb about, we're in VR. We can't have full sign language the way we do in real life. That's another reason you need to go out and like meet real life deaf people, because there's so many things in VR we can't do. Even with the face tracking that some people have, you can't fully show the facial expressions that are required for sign language. Facial expressions can completely change the meaning of anything. You can have a full conversation just using facial expressions if you're good enough. Can't do that in VR. We are limited with our hands, body language. If you have face tracking, you can kind of add a little bit, but still not enough. You will be missing out on all of those nuances if you aren't learning in real life at the same time and not trying to go out and meet deaf people in real life. So I have that list of all the different sign languages we offer. One other question that pops up all the time is, what about PSE? What's that? I've heard about PSE. What is PSE? So going back to everything being a spectrum, this is my special spectrum. So over here, you have ASL, full ASL, American Sign Language, full with its own grammar structure, with its own syntax, with its own cultural meanings of words, everything. All the way on this side, you have C, Signed Exact English. So Signing Exact English is taking an English sentence and taking each part of that sentence and manually coding it in some sort of sign. So, for example, with all the suffixes and prefixes, so I am going to the store to buy some milk. It's every single part of that sentence has a sign. That C itself is not a language. It is labeled as a manual coding system, because it is just taking the English that already is its own language, that has its own rules, its own grammar, and just manually coding it into sign. That is what C is. ASL is its own language. Everything in the middle is PSE. Pigeon Signed English, which basically means you're trying to get to ASL, but you're not there yet. If you are learning any sign language, your goal should be to learn that language, right? So that language is over here. That's full fluent language. If you guys learn Spanish as like an English speaker and you try and learn Spanish, you're not just going to learn the words and then keep them in English word order. It wouldn't make sense. Now, like someone who is fluent in Spanish can probably understand what you mean, but you're going to sound like a crazy person. The same thing with ASL. It is its own language. If you are trying to take the English and just sign each part, fine, you're going to be understandable, but people are going to look at you like, what are you doing? It's the same thing. So PSE is really, for me, I think of it as the road to ASL. Because anybody who starts learning ASL, and again, I'm an ASL person. I have been learning BSL as well, but I'm not fluent in BSL. I don't know any LSF, DGS, KSL, any of that stuff. I'm focusing on the ASL because that's my experience. But with ASL, whenever you first start learning ASL, you're going to be over here because you grew up speaking English. That is your skill. That is your language that you think in right now, is full English. And you're going to have to manually think, okay, what's the sign for that? What's the sign for that? What's the sign for that? And try and manually code them until you start picking up the grammar, picking up syntax, start learning how to get all the way over there to ASL. While you're on that road, you're in PSE. So if you guys are trying to learn, you can say, yeah, I'm learning ASL. And if anybody says, no, you're signing PSE, you can say, yeah, right now I'm signing PSE because I'm working on learning ASL. That is my goal. It's perfectly fine to be on PSE road. It means you are learning. Don't let anybody shame you for that. My personal little soapbox that I'm going to stand on is I get a little bit upset at people who are like, PSE, I'm satisfied, I'm good, that's good enough. Like, you're not learning the full language. That's the goal, not here. This is the end of the rainbow. This is where your pot of gold is. Don't give up halfway through. Learn the full language. It's so much fun. Whenever you become fluent in ASL like I did, learning that you can play with the language and all the like fun, like interesting things you can do with sign, it's still, I've been doing this for 10 years and it still blows my mind all the time. So don't give up on ASL. Keep going on PSE road. All right. So another question that pops up all the time is, oh, helping hands. That's where all the mutes hang out, right? So we are trying to help clarify that meaning and that label. So a lot of people in VR are mute. They don't want to turn on their mics. They don't want to voice. That's perfectly fine. But there are actual people who have a medical condition that prevent them from speaking, that actually cannot. They're not making the choice. They can't. So we are trying to make sure that we are reserving that label of mute for the people who actually are mute. So we have actual mutism. Being mute is a physical medical condition that prevents you from speaking. We have lots of people. I become really good friends with one person who has a muscle dysfunction. I can't remember the full word of it, but something on their vocal cords that they can kind of talk for a little bit, but it becomes incredibly painful. So they don't talk for very long. Whenever they do talk, it's very quiet. It's very brief. They can label themselves mute. Dysmorphia, maybe. That sounds right. I can't remember the word for it, but that sounds right. So they can label themselves mute. Whenever I go hang out, most of the time, whenever I'm hanging out with friends, I typically turn my mic off. I don't like to actually talk in game a lot of times. Most of the time, I just prefer to sign with my friends. So I'm in game mute. I am voice off. I am mic off. There is a ton of different ways you can explain it and label yourself as a person who doesn't voice in game. But please, we are asking you, do not label yourselves mute unless you have the medical condition of being mute. And it is in no way we're trying to say you can't be mute, you can't turn your voice off in game, all that. No. Like I said, I do it all the time. Just we're trying to reserve that label for the people who actually have the medical condition in respect to them and that community. Cool. Sorry for giving all the heavy stuff. This is what freshman orientation is. Like I said, we have lots of questions pop up. We're trying to get them out so everybody can know what they're doing and get on into it. I promise we're about to get into the fun stuff about how to learn sign, where to learn sign, all that stuff. So What do you do if you're out in a world and you see people signing? What do? Go say hi. That's it. Like, people are scared to go interact with signing people. Go sign. That's how you're going to become better. That's how you're going to practice. That's how you're going to learn. Go do it. If you can't sign, you don't know how to sign yet, you just joined the community, you haven't gone to a bunch of classes, you haven't learned enough, well, what do? You've got options. So I actually think this list might be outdated. I might be wrong. But these are 3 worlds that we have put on our list of suggested places for you to start learning sign on your own. My recommendation is the second one, the experimental ASL world. It is from Bob. He has made, it's a very, very small world, and it has a video player that shows the signs. And then it also has a 3D avatar that you can actually like look around and see what it looks like in a 3D space. It has lists of vocabulary words along with a quiz mode. The words there have a color system. If it's green, that means that it has been verified from a panel of fluent members who have seen the recording and checked it off, whether they approve and say, yes, this is correct, or if they say, no, it's wrong, we need to record it again. Both me and DM are on that board. So we have been working, trying to approve all the words. We think we start back up soon. So there are some words that are still yellow. So yellow means that they have been recorded. They have been put into the world, but they have not been approved yet by the board. And then if it has red, that means don't listen to that sign. It's still on the list, but we have deemed it wrong and it needs to be recorded again. But any of the words on that list that are green, you can fully believe those are the correct signs. You can copy them from the video and the avatar and learn on your own, kind of self-paced. So that is the world I recommend. We also obviously have classes. I'm sure some of you, did any of you go to Jenny's class before this? Okay, yeah. So Jenny just had a class. We have classes every day, differing languages. So we have our teachers who are all volunteers who post their schedule, what they're available for, and it's pretty much the same every week. So even if you look in the Discord and see the class schedule channel, it'll say like, oh, 2 days ago. Just know that it's probably going to be the exact same next week. Everything's pretty much the same week to week. With just a few differences if something pops up. So we actually have lessons taught from volunteer teachers. We have a lesson board that some teachers follow the lesson board and just give vocabulary. And then we have some teachers who decide, today I'm going to make my own lesson. Crow7, he teaches mostly on Sundays. He almost always makes his own lesson, and it's always based on some sort of theme. I know recently he did one for VRCon. He's done ones for Among Us whenever it was super popular in VR. Does stuff on like school subjects. He typically picks a theme and makes an entire lesson about that. Jenny makes her own lessons. Sometimes they're about, like, I think recently, I don't know what today's was. I missed today's class. But last time I went to her class, it was a timeline of your life. So it's like major events in life. So again, some teachers will follow the lesson board that's already been set up. Some are going to make up their own lesson. Most teachers, whenever they're ready for it, they'll post in events and they'll actually say what they plan to teach that day. So you can see and say, oh, I need that lesson. Or you can say, no, I've been to that lesson. I have something else I need to do today instead. We also have class archives, where we have our archivists who record and post on our YouTube. So previous classes can be found there. Yes, Big Brink is one of our archivists. So thank you, Big Brink, for helping out with that. Yes, everybody. Yay for Big Brink. So we have some of our classes, unfortunately not all, but some of our classes do get recorded and put on the YouTube. So if you miss a class, you can go and maybe it's going to be on the YouTube and you can watch it at your own pace. Yep, I kind of jumped around. I should have done that one up there. Anyway, and then yes, all of our volunteer teachers are fluent in that language that they're teaching. So our rules for class attendance, it's kind of the same no matter what. You need to have accepted our Discord rules. That is the one way we keep everybody responsible. Classes are invite only. So we do not let people who are not in the Discord come to classes, because then we don't know if they've accepted the rules. We don't know if they are going to be responsible for themselves. So please do not share the link. If you have a friend who wants to come, send them the invite link to the Discord, have them join, and then send like a message to one of the mods and say, hey, my friend just joined. They just made their intro post. Can you approve it really quick? Because sometimes we get a little behind on approving intros. But if you have a friend who's like, hey, I need to join, I need to go to class, message one of the mods and we can probably approve it pretty quick. And then once they're approved, they can get in on the class and come on in. But we do need everybody to have finished, accepted the rules on Discord before you come to class. Also, when you're in class, you have people like me who do not have the best computer. So like right now, I have almost everybody's avatar turned off because I could not see if I had everybody's on. But for the people who do have it on, it's still VRChat. It's not perfectly optimized. So please, when you come to class, make sure you are using an optimized avatar. It needs to be good or better. Please, 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 please. We do have in... I'm trying to remember the name of the world. It's the new school world. We have like at the front of the school, when you go in, there's all these lockers and they have signing capable avatars that you can do, and they're all good quality. Also, most times before classes, for like Jenny's class, she'll ask somebody to come up who has one of these signing avatars on and turn on cloning, so everybody who needs it can copy that. Those avatars, kind of like this one, are optimized for signing. They have good hand shapes for those who are on Quest or Oculus or Vive Pro. Anybody who doesn't have the full finger tracking, they have good hand shapes for signing. But you don't have to use that kind of avatar. Just make sure it's good or better. Whenever we're in class, we ask you to keep your mics off. Even if you're not talking, if you just are like taking a drink or eating a bag of chips or something, your mic will pick it up and then everybody's staring at you. It happens too much. So just keep your mic off during class, unless you're recognized and say, hey, you have a question, by all means, you can voice for that. It's just to try and keep the class smoothly and make sure nobody's being distracted. We have too many people with squirrel ADHD like me. I mean, something distracts me and I'm completely lost. Yes, all those. Also, make sure don't block line of sight to the teacher. That's why most of our classes are kind of like this, where we have a slope and then we have a second level. Just try and make sure that everybody can see. This is a visual language, so if you can't see the teacher, what's the point? And luckily for us, Shaw has made this world with a nice little camera thingy. I don't know. I know nothing about making worlds, so I don't know like the technical aspects of it, but it has a little camera thing and you can see me and you can see the teacher. It's really, really nice. And just, kind of in general, be respectful to everybody. Also, we do in the Discord have a VRC signer role. Uh, that is Aria. Your mic's on. I thought it was me, and then I saw the bubble. Okay. So we have the VRC signer role, and that we give out to people that we have noticed are consistently attending classes. Um, it doesn't really do anything in the Discord. It's just like a little badge saying, "Hey, I go to classes." Um, just kind of a little like shiny sticker for you to have. But we do base that on who we see going to classes often. Attendance, we do track it. We have a bot that tracks it for who goes to all these classes. But it's not required. It's not like you have to go to every class, and if you miss one, then you're not going to get the VRC signer role. We're not that strict by any means. We encourage consistent attendance because this is a use it or lose it skill. If you are not practicing your sign, you will forget it. So we encourage you to keep going, to continually improve. But if you miss, it's fine. We all have real lives. It's no big deal. And again, like if we just notice you're a consistent class goer, we will give you the VRC signer role. Now, our volunteer teachers, I told you earlier we're going to talk about how we select them. So these are our qualifications for our teachers. We require them to be fluent in the sign language they are teaching. If completely removing the sign language aspect of it, if you are a college student and you have been speaking English your whole life and you want to go to college class to learn Spanish, do you really want your teacher to be a person who's been speaking Spanish for 6 months? You don't get the same experience. Sure, they may be good. They may be a great teacher, but they don't have the breadth of experience. They don't fully know the culture. They don't have all the skill sets yet. You can't fully learn a language in 6 months. It's impossible. You can get close. You can try, but you can't fully learn it. And you don't want to be teaching and then be teaching the wrong thing. It's the same thing with sign. We want our teachers to be fluent members, to have full competency in that language, to make sure that they are able to provide correct ASL, KSL, DGS, all that, and also have the cultural competency because the culture is really important in it. Again, like I said at the beginning, the deaf community has been faced with lots of difficulties with isolation and language deprivation. They have that shared experience and that really like tight bond. If you have a teacher who's only been signing for 6 months, they don't really understand that. They don't really have the internal knowledge about deaf culture the way a deaf person can. So we select people who are actually fluent in sign. That's why we also have some languages that are used in the community, but we don't have anybody to teach them yet because we don't have any fluent member who is ready to teach it. That was one of our struggles recently, trying to get a JSL teacher, but we finally found one. So we finally can have JSL. We're very excited about that. And we're looking for more languages. We have to find the right person who can correctly teach it. We also make sure all of our teachers have good communication skills because they are teaching, and make sure that they're very professional because they are representative of our community. Also understand all of our volunteer teachers are not actual certified real life teachers under any licensure board, anything. They are all volunteers. They are selected from the current mods and teaching staff in Helping Hands who decide this person we think is a good fit. We do have one exception, kind of, but they don't really teach often. That would be CODA Pop, the other ASL interpreter in Helping Hands. So he actually is an ASL teacher in real life. He is also an interpreter in real life. He is also getting his master's, I think. Master's or PhD, one of the two. I can't remember. I think it's master's. Currently getting it about ASL and education. He is our exception, but he also is very, very busy and typically doesn't teach classes. He can sub and help out, but he doesn't teach himself. So he's the special one. The rest of our teachers, none are actual real life certified teachers. Wait, I think I just told you something wrong, because I think our JSL teacher, right? Raphael, JSL teacher, real life teacher, right? I'm wrong. Okay. So Raphael, our JSL teacher, was a teacher, not licensed teacher, but he did volunteer teaching in real life. Okay, so kind of not under any licensure board, anything, but still teacher. Okay. Still, we are not like, we don't require our teachers to have a teaching certificate or a teacher's license or anything like that. It's all volunteer. We all have real lives. We all are just doing the best we can, but we want to make sure that we are providing the best options we can. So, you guys want to go learn sign? Go do it. That's the point, is to actually interact with the deaf community, to sign, to use this language. If you're not using it, you're going to lose it. I am proof of that. I said at the very beginning of my presentation that I got my first degree in modern languages, where I did Spanish, French, and German. If you try and talk to me in French or German right now, I will have no idea what you're saying, because I haven't used it in almost 10 years. I completely shifted my focus to ASL. I don't use French. I don't use German anymore. I've completely lost it. It's the same with sign. If you're not using it, you will lose that the neural pathways for it. So go learn, go interact, socialize. That's the best way to learn. Honestly, that's how I learn in real life, is I went and hung out with deaf people at my local community and just hung out with them. That's really how I improved my sign skills to the point where I'm at today. Also, sign with other students. Like, if you can't find a deaf person, you can still practice with other students. Just make sure that you have that in the back of your mind, that if you don't have a fluent member there to help correct mistakes, you might be making those mistakes and they might get ingrained if you don't have anybody to point them out and help you say, whoa, you're signing that wrong. Make sure you don't make bad habits. And us fluent members are probably going to do that, where we're going to try and tell you it's not, we're trying to put you down and say you're not doing it correctly, you suck. It's, you're not doing it correctly, let me help you do it correctly so you don't continue to make mistakes. We want you to have communication. If you're not having communication, what's the point? So if you're doing it wrong, we fluent members are going to be like, hey, you're signing that wrong, let me show you the correct sign. Cool, okay, continue your story. We're not trying to be mean, we're just trying to help fix, because we are a teaching community. We want to make sure that you guys learn correctly. So one thing that pops up quite often, because we talk about making sure we have fluent members who teach, we need to make sure we understand the difference between teaching and collaborative learning. So we will have people come up to us and tell the mod team that they saw a student teaching in the experimental world. And we ask a couple questions and find out they weren't teaching, they were doing collaborative learning. So teaching is actually speaking as an authority on the language, actually trying to impart knowledge and say, I know because I'm skilled, I know what I'm talking about, I'm right, here you go, let me teach you, let me show you the ways, young Padawan. That is teaching. Collaborative learning is, oh my god, I just learned this really cool new sign, let me show you. Or, hold on, you just signed house like this. No, it's this way. I just noticed, hey, you're signing that wrong. Let me help you remember the correct way to do that. That is collaborative learning. That is working together, and we highly encourage that. We want you guys to learn and help each other and get better. And especially if you guys learn a really cool sign, show your friends. That's perfectly fine. We don't mind. Show them. But don't speak as an authority on it if you're not an authority on it. It's kind of self-explanatory. That's what you have the fluent members for. We're the ones who can say, hey, this is the correct sign, and that's why we have lessons where we teach vocabulary. So then you can go and hang out with your friends and actually use that vocabulary. So just please refrain from teaching if you are not a fluent member, but by all means, collaborative learning. Last kind of little bit, really. I think we're almost done. So the Discord roles, if you notice, I keep talking about fluent members. Those are the people in the Discord who their names are purple. So their names are purple, and I believe it has a little symbol next to their name that'll say ASL, BSL, JSL, whatever language that they are fluent in. Those are the people who can speak as authority on that language. They know their stuff. Underneath that would be our IRL student. Those are people who are actually real life attending classes, going to either high school or college level, actually getting real life exposure to that language. They are not fluent, but they're on their way to it. And they are having that real life experience of seeing the facial expressions, seeing all the like nuance things that happen with sign, that we give priority to them saying, hey, these people aren't yet authorities, but they're on the way. They have the real life actual education from an actual licensed certified teacher that we can say, yeah, they know what they're talking about. They should know what they're talking about. Underneath that, we have the VRC signer role, which is green. Those are the people who consistently attend classes in VR. Those are the ones who you can say, yeah, they should know what they're talking about in VR sign. That might not translate to real life sign because it's different. But in VR, they can say, yeah, they probably know what they're talking about. And then under that is blue. That is just our general member role. That is just for anybody who's joined, who hasn't yet gone to enough classes to get the VRC signer role, or who just joined. We have one person, I'm not going to out them, but we have one person who just joined. They are fluent real life. I've met them real life. Whenever they are comfortable and ready, I'm going to give them the fluent role. But right now they are hiding as a blue, as just a member, because they are brand new to VR. So I'm not going to like overwhelm them until they kind of like gotten their feet under them. And then, of course, on top of all this, we have the yellow and the orange roles, and those are our staff. That doesn't typically correlate with sign skill. Those are just staff that we use for different things. Yellow is organizer, who make events, who teach classes, who do the movie nights, who do game nights, blah, blah, blah. All different events. And then we have, above them, we have orange. We have the admin role. And those are the people who actually run the community, make the decisions, mod the Discord, all that. We have both fluent and non-fluent people in both of those roles. Again, that's why it doesn't correlate with sign skill. It's just about running the community and running the Discord. So, but if you need help with classes, with that kind of stuff, the yellow people are your organizers and teachers. If you have a mod issue, the orange, that's who you talk to. Okay? And then last, pretty sure this is the last real thing. Yes. So, quick tips for interacting with deaf people. In real life, you go up to a deaf person. They cannot hear you. Are you going to go behind them and say, hey, DM, hey? Do you think that's going to work? So, Real life, you'd have a deaf person, you give them a tap on the shoulder, be like, hey, I'm trying to get your attention. And deaf people are very used to just getting a little tap and they're like, okay, somebody's trying to get my attention. VR doesn't work unless you're one of the people who have that special thing on your avatar that like you get a notification. And I don't even know if that's still a thing anymore. I don't know. I know nothing about avatars. But if you're trying to get the attention of a deaf person in VR, just kind of get into their line of sight and wave at them. That's all you got to do. And they will know you're trying to get their attention. Provide feedback. If you are signing away on a long story and the person is just staring at you, how do you know they actually understand any of what you've said? You need to give some sort of feedback to just be like, oh yeah, really, I'm going to teach you one quick sign right now. So if you have index, you're going to do a Y hand. If you have the avatars that can make a Y hand, you're going to make a Y hand, which why is my pinky not working now? There we go. If you can't and you have the rock and roll hand, you can stay on the rock and roll hand. But real life, it'll be a Y hand. You move this up and down. This means, oh yeah, I get it. Okay. It's all of those like things you'd say to a hearing person, all encompassed in one sign. Like, oh yeah, okay, I get it. Quick little feedback that you can give, saying, oh, I understand what you're talking about. I understand your story. Okay. Just Y hand up and down. You can also just nod your head. You can just be like, oh, really? Just give some sort of feedback. Otherwise, we don't know if you're just staring at us, and for all we know, you've crashed. Give some sort of feedback. It just helps the deaf person know that you're actually understanding their story. Because if you are a brand new person too, and you are listening to a deaf person and they're going on telling all these stories and stuff, and you're not understanding any of it, if you're not telling them you don't understand, they're going to assume you understand and keep going. If you say, hold up, I didn't get that, go back, explain again, please, they can go, oh, okay, and bring it down to a more accessible level. That's one thing that almost all deaf people are skilled in whenever they're like dealing with new signers, is bringing it down to a level that matches you. It's called code switching. So it is just bringing down to a level where communication can happen. So we as, not me, but we as fluent people who sign, deaf, hard of hearing people, need that feedback to know if you're getting it or if we need to bring it down. If you're getting it fine, we can bring it up. We just need some sort of feedback so we can properly match. And again, kind of leads into that last one. Ask questions. If you don't understand, ask them. I have never met a deaf person who, if you ask, say, hey, I don't understand, can you explain again, that they get mad. They want communication because of how isolated they've been, how much language deprivation has happened in their lives. They want that communication. So if you are providing it, if you are talking with them and you don't understand something, tell them. They will be happy to go back and explain again because they just want that human interaction. They want a person who can talk without all these other barriers that they've had to experience their whole lives. So they will bring it down to your level, but you have to ask them for it. So, recap of everything we've learned. We did a definition of terms. We talked about sign language itself. We talked about ASL PSE and SEE. We talked about mutism, talking about the actual label of being mute or in-game mute or however you want to label it. Just don't use the word mute if you're not actually mute. Where and how to learn sign, and then Discord rules and roles. So, to wrap everything up, Q&A. So, open it up for questions. If anybody has any specific questions, by all means, let's see how well I can pretend I know what I'm talking about. Yes, DM. Okay. Cry? Yes. What's up?
Cry. Okay, so you said on the sign language session that we should learn sign language or native language. And what if you cannot just provide that because you are not teaching this language? For instance, for Polish, because there is a Polish sign language, but it isn't taught on the handicap hands in general.
So, like,
And
if
we
you
don't.
can't learn your country's sign language,
Yeah.
okay. So I'm American. This is a free country, right? So you can learn whatever you want to learn. I'm just saying my suggestion is to learn your country's sign language. If it's another country other than ASL, I really don't know how to help because I don't know that sign language. I don't know where it would be offered. That's kind of on your own to try and find. If you can't find, then that's just that might just be your situation. And as terrible as it is, it might happen. Some people don't have access to appropriate sign language classes in real life. And that's fine. It's what you can do. I'm highly suggesting it. If you can't, it's not like I'm going to come to your house and knock down your door and say you're a bad person. I'm just suggesting try and learn your country's sign language first. But if you can't and you still want to interact with everybody here, then go ahead and keep learning ASL because that's what most of this community learns. All right.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions?
I have a question.
Dionysus.
Well, I'm a PC user. I don't have VR. I clearly don't have hands, so waving in front of someone is a little bit impossible.
Yeah.
What I do is just hold my mirror, personal mirror, and go like this in front of their face.
That works.
I try
So
to do
that's
that as
an option to do.
Intrusive. Hello.
That's another option you can do. Just use emotes. Just do the wave emote. But yeah, there's different ways to get around it. Yeah.
I just thought that.
Yeah. So if you're a desktop person and that's what you need to do, obviously Dionysus has got it figured out. So there you go. And then you can use your chat box to type with a deaf person. So okay. Aria.
Hi. I'm kind of trying to learn IRL sign language as well. When it comes to the compatibility of IRL sign language and in VR, is it the case of if I try signing what I've learned here in real life, are they going to look at me like I'm crazy? Is that like a big no? Or is it just going to be some confusion because of the differences?
So yes and no. Obviously, like I'm assuming ASL, right? Okay. So ASL, obviously the letters that we use here in VR are completely different than what you use in real life because we don't do B and F and M and we don't do any of that in real life. So if you go and sign that in real life, people are going to be like, "Are you okay?" Which unfortunately I've done. I am a professional interpreter, and one day, luckily, it was a very like low stakes thing, but I've actually tried to spell something, and I did S in real life, and I had to stop myself and go, "I'm so sorry." That okay, keep going. So yes, you will get weird looks, but if you just like you said you're in like real life classes, so if you explain to your teacher and say, "Hey, I'm learning sign language in VR at the same time," they'll probably be able to. I mean, they'll understand. They'll be like, "Okay, so you know, little differences," and they'll help like be on the lookout for things they can help fix. But obviously there are things that in VR don't translate to real life sign, and there are things that real life sign don't translate to VR, like facial expressions. We can't do that here in VR. Even with the face tracking that I've seen, and I could be wrong, maybe It's just the avatars they've used. But even with face tracking, I have not seen anybody whose eyebrows are fully controllable. And your eyebrows are very important for ASL. You can completely negate the meaning of things with your eyebrows, change the meaning. I can ask a question that is the exact same question, but depending on if my eyebrows are up or my eyebrows are down, determines what kind of answer I'm looking for. It's all just on the eyebrows. You can't do that in VR. So those are things in real life that won't translate here. So yeah, it's a bit of a struggle trying to oscillate between the two, but it's a surmountable obstacle. It's just going to require a little more like forethought and actual like active thinking about what you're doing. Okay. Other questions? Going once.
I have a question.
Gummy? All right.
If I were to live in Canada, would I learn ASL or BSL?
So in Canada, most of English speaking Canada does ASL from what I know. I could be wrong. And I don't know like your specific area. That would be a thing you'd have to find out about your area and find out what they use. But from what I know, most of the English speaking Canada uses ASL and most of the French speaking Canada uses LSF, the French language. As far as I know, nobody really uses BSL in Canada. Again, I don't live there. I don't know. I'm not an authority on that, but from what I've heard, I think that's the case. So that would be finding out in your local area what they use. And then going that way. But it's, from what I know, it's either ASL or LSF, not BSL at all. All right. Any other questions?
I have a question.
T-Moni.
So I was playing around with this ASL avatar, and I found out that you can do different hand combinations to like cross your fingers for an R, but sometimes I can't replicate it, and I was wondering if there are resources that can give you a guide on how to handle both of your hands so you can do unique signs.
So I'm pretty sure I know like what kind of avatar you're talking about because I used to have some before I was on Index. I'm saying that like it's like been a while. I literally just got an Index like a week ago. But so I tried those kind of avatars, and honestly it confused me more than just trying to get along with normal hand shapes. So I personally don't know of any resources other than just practice with it. Or maybe you could contact like the avatar author and see if they have anything. But from what I know, I've never seen any resources on that. I've seen resources about how to do Oculus and Vive hand shapes. There's like a poster in the experimental ASL world about the different hand shapes you can make and what buttons to press. But with the advanced ASL, different hand shapes and combo stuff, I don't have any resources for that. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. All right. Duperland.
Then does that mean that yes, so does that mean that investing into a index controller, is it good, like based off of your experience after using what I have, like a Vive controller?
Yes. So for me, I'll give you like the quick story. I first got in VR back in like February of 2020, and then I had no idea about Helping Hands until October. I joined in October of 2020, and I went to Mr. Dummy's Sign and Fun world at that time, and I saw 2 students there who were practicing their signs, and I tried to sign with them, and I was having the biggest struggle because I had already been fluent in real life, and trying to translate that to Oculus hand shapes, I was just struggling. They had to teach me like step by step how to do the alphabet. Once I got that, then I was able to kind of get it, and then I was able to finally take off and use the skills I had being fluent and apply it to the game. Now that I have Index, and I have I had two friends who, whenever I'd visit their houses, they had Index, and I was able to borrow it and put it on. The ability to sign is completely different, and I'm loving that I'm on Index now. My experience is Index is so much better for signing. I don't feel as limited. I still feel somewhat limited because I can't do like an R. I can't cross my fingers. I can't spread them for a V or put them together for a U. But I'm not like I can do this, and I used to not be able to do that. I can do this, where before I had to pick that like which avatar was going to have which hand shapes. So I love having the Index. So that's my experience. It is so much better for signing.
Thank you.
Of course. Other questions? Neutral Rabbit.
So basically, I've been using like the hand tracking on my quest, and it's been like very effective on like my behalf. Is that like somewhat acceptable? Because I haven't heard like any teacher like really address the quest hand tracking, when like teaching.
So I know we have Amma. I don't know the full name. It's like Amarante. They are teacher, or they're fluent. They tried to go out for a teacher position. We were giving them their like trial classes to see how it went, and then they got really sick, so they kind of had to suspend it. But they got the quest with the hand tracking, and they've been using it, and they like it. Most of our fluent members don't have that yet, so they can't really speak to it, but Amarante can. So if you find them in the Discord, like I said, it's Amarante, I think is how they spell it. You can like send a DM to them or like ping them in the Discord and like general chat and be like, hey, can I ask your opinion on that? They could probably mention something about it, but I don't know, and most of our teachers don't have it, so most of us don't really know either.
All right.
Other questions?
I have another question.
Dionysus.
My main language is Spanish. It's the language I was born in, and learning English along the years. Well, I kind of need to know the full sentence in English before translating it into Spanish. Is ASL interpreting somewhat along the lines of that?
Yes. So it's like the reason you have to wait for the whole sentence is because of the grammar structure, right? Because English grammar and Spanish grammar are different, and sometimes what happens at the beginning of the sentence in English happens at the end in Spanish. It's the same with ASL. With interpreting, professional interpreters, we have a thing we call lag time, which is kind of funny because here in VR you don't want lag, but when you're professionally interpreting, lag is a good thing. What on earth did my hand died? Okay, I'll fix that later. Because this has happened before. I have to like restart my whole computer. My hand died. Okay. Gosh, that's going to distract me. Okay. So professional interpreters, we have lag time. And that means we're kind of like behind what the hearing person is saying because we're waiting for enough information to put it in ASL because the ASL grammar structure is different. So yes, we have kind of the same thing in ASL with we have to wait sometimes for a full sentence sometimes not. It depends. Sometimes we can get through it. Sometimes we have to wait for like more. And like whenever I'm out professionally interpreting for doctors' offices, most of the time this is what happens. Doctors' offices is the patient will be telling me something, and the doctor like starts to look at me like, why aren't you voicing yet? And I have to tell them like real quick, just like, I'm waiting for more information before I can start interpreting. And then, okay, they've given me enough. Now I can start speaking and telling them what they're saying. So yes, that
Yeah,
totally
you're
happens in
right,
ASL.
yes. I have seen that before actually.
Yeah.
It's the lag time. Sometimes I just think it's like more of a technology thing. You know, like a video delay.
Yeah. I mean, there is that too, but mostly it's just. I'm so mad at my hand. But yeah, no, there's totally like you have to wait to get more information. All right. Last question, and then we're gonna call it because I have to fix this. It's going to bug me. I'm going to die. Chefska.
Has VRChat team reached out to like helping hands to better accommodate for signing? So is there any news on that?
Honestly, I'm not sure. I don't know. I know whenever we had the big giant thing about easy anti-cheat getting implemented and all the mods were taken off, and we had tons of people who were like, no, we need mods. That's how it's accessible for us. That's how we are able to communicate. We need the speech to text mods, all that kind of stuff, the captioning mods, everything. And VRChat's been very good about listening to us, specifically helping hands as kind of the representatives of that demographic who need that help. But I know a lot of it's taken place in DMs between some of the VRChat devs and some of our admins. I'm not in that group, so I don't know if there's been any recent developments. I honestly couldn't tell you. So, but I do know that we are still in contact with them and that they still are respecting us as representatives for that group to try and help accommodate and make VRChat more accessible. So I know that, but as to what's actually currently happening, I have no idea. All right. Okay, with that, let's take a picture. We're going to go up to the big giant logo at the back. We're going to take a big giant picture so I can post it, and then I can restart